Welcome to episode 7, Crush Fantasy Football with your hosts, James and Dolan. Dolan, did you picture Timmy Trumpet on the way in before that?
No, no, not yet. But I would be lying if I said I didn't play that song earlier this morning to get me pumped up thinking about football. And let's call it getting pumped up for a exciting wedding playlist as well. But yeah, Timmy Trumpet can bring the energy.
Dude, I think we got to have him on so that we can use that song with no copyright infringements.
I'll share some of our revenue with Timmy Trumpet if he lets us join, if he's willing to join, that is.
Yeah. I don't know how. Do you ever think about how Edwin Diaz found that song? Because I don't think no one had heard of it before Edwin Diaz, and then everybody loved it, right? So I was just like, did someone send it to him? Are they boys? I don't know.
Great
But I think
question.
about it. I
It's
think about it.
one of life's unsolved mysteries. We'll never know.
So, as usual, right, we're going to start episode 7 with what we call Take Montezuma, our hot takes to get it out of our system. So we can bring that kind of in-depth analysis the rest of the show. Take Montezuma is sponsored by Soiree Season. I recently received some feedback that I was saying soiree incorrectly. So it's not soiree, it's soiree. But if you're in the wedding registry game, please check out Soiree Season. Use promo code CRUSH Fantasy Football. All right, Dolan, fire us up. Take Montezuma.
I'll start off with my football related one. And I think this is a little spicy, but this is around a player who's getting a lot of buzz right now, and a player who honestly got a little, or is getting a little less buzz than what they got last year, and that's Marvin Harrison. And I'm working on him as my next main football article that I'm working on. And as I've dove into a lot of the research, I think the career arc that Marv is on is basically the exact same as DeAndre Hopkins. When you look at what their rookie years look like, the numbers are almost identical to one another. And then obviously Hopkins blew up in a major, major way. And they have the connection of both being on the Cardinals and playing with Kyler Murray. And so when I think of, hey, what is this guy going to do? Or what does he need to do rather to get to that next tier of being an elite fantasy football or just football asset in general? I think following the path that DeAndre Hopkins was on makes a lot of sense. And when you look at how Marv is actually trying to get there, a lot of the skills that he's been working on this offseason, beefing up, getting more aggressive and tenacious at the catch point, really align well with that DeAndre Hopkins style of game. So I'm very interested to see if he actually follows that same arc, but he clearly has the talent to be in that echelon of receiver. Coming into the league, he was the most hyped up wide receiver prospect pretty much of all time, I think we can say. And I think that, we shouldn't let year one scare us away from that because the numbers he put up were still pretty respectable. And, I think eventually the talent is going to win out. Now, I'm not going to be one bit surprised if it's as early as year 2.
That it's funny. That's the Adunze argument that everyone would make too. DeAndre Hopkins. When I was trying to consult myself with Adunze year 2, that was the comp. The only thing I can think of, and I don't know how much of a factor you think he is obviously Deshaun Watson was incredible, right? When D Hop had him. Is Kyler kind of good enough? And however long term you think Kyler will be there, is that good enough to support that?
Yeah, so that is one of the big drawbacks or red flags, I think. Kyler, looking at the numbers, he's never reached 4,000 yards passing in a season, which is pretty crazy. He's knocked on the door a bunch. He's had a couple, 37 to 3,900 yard seasons. And so when you look at the numbers and actually try and break it out, you're basically saying Marv needs to be a third of Kyler's production to be like an elite fantasy asset, the 1,300 plus yards, the double digit or so touchdowns. And his target share last year was in the 23-ish%, 22 to 23% range. So I think you do need that to take a slight step up. And I think one of the other, downsides is when Kyler was supporting DeAndre Hopkins, he didn't have an equivalent of Trey McBride to soak up as many targets. So there is a lot more competition now. But that's also another point that I didn't bring up about the comparison. I do think we might see Marv's best performances, his like elite production come once he does get that quarterback. He might be like DeAndre Hopkins, where, prior to the Deshaun Watson era, we were like, this guy's awesome, but catching passes from this just band of quarterbacks that the Texans trotted out, because if we remember at one point, they were in absolute quarterback hell, and Hopkins was producing anyway. We might still see that arc with Marv, where it takes a change of scenery to get there. But I think he has the talent, and I think the moral of the story is we shouldn't let year one scare us away from who he is as a prospect, because the film still suggests this dude has all the talent.
Yep, I'm definitely not shorting him. All right, my non-football hot take is sequels, and not your typical sequel, right? This is 20 years after the original was made. Sequels
Mm,
need to stop, right? So I think the
is
two
there a
most
Happy
recent
Gilmore
examples
jab
that,
coming in here?
yep, Happy Gilmore. And the one that I think is even worse than Happy Gilmore, I get Happy Gilmore is like a victory tour for Sandler, and everyone's in it, right? It's cameos. There's no storyline, whatever. I get it. It'll make Netflix a bunch of money. Gladiator 2 was disrespectful to the original Gladiator, right? That's an all time upper echelon of movies, right? If you don't know in the first 5 years after a movie's going to be made that you want a sequel, then don't have the sequel, right? You should have to decide in that first 5 years, right? We're doing the sequel or we're not. 20 years later, we can't decide. The one that's coming out that scares me already is the same thing. Bend It Like Beckham?
Wow, what a throwback.
Yeah, right? They're making the sequel now. And I'm just like, dude, this is going to be so bad. I already know it. It's disrespectful for the first one.
Is this sequel
There's no
Bend It Like
creativity in
Messi,
Hollywood.
or is it still focused on Beckham?
It's actually a great question that I don't know the answer to. We should draft who it should be. Bend it like what? I don't know. Besides Messi, I don't even know
Don
if he's
Gatanis.
there. Bend it like Don Gatanis, right? I'd watch it.
I'd watch it.
That's my hot take. I think you have to know if you're going to do a sequel within the first 5 years, or else you can't do it. Because the disrespect coming out of Hollywood right now to these classics as a money grab is
Respect the take.
it's too much.
Also respect the fact that Hollywood's like, screw it, we're going to make a ton of money off of this anyway. We don't care about the quality of the product. We're just putting something out there and going to rake in millions. Not a bad play by them, as frustrating as it can be for the end consumer.
It is a bad play, man. We hang our hat on quality here on the Crush Fantasy Football
Hey,
Show.
if someone wants to if someone wants to pay us a couple $1 million to go make Bend It Like Don Gatanis, I
Yeah.
might be okay with the quality slip.
All right. What we're doing today is, so we are peak training camp hype season. I think what we're going to do is we're going to go through a couple of the more interesting training camp battles and how they'll impact kind of your draft and redraft and current ADPs. What's kind of fluff, and what do we think are the most intriguing battles? So we'll go back and forth and get through 5 or 6, but Dolan, kick us off.
Yeah, the first one is definitely getting a lot of buzz. The battle that's going on right now in the Jaguars backfield. So looking at the three main names we're dealing with here by ADP, Travis Etienne leads the charge as the RB 32, second overall, followed by Tank Bigsby at RB 41, 116 overall, and then rookie Bashal Tutin rounds out the trio with an ADP of RB 55 and 158 overall. So there's a lot of optimism around the Jags offense in general, with Liam Cohen coming on board, and I think the Cohen connection in particular has a lot of people excited about Tutin. Meanwhile, when you look at the incumbent players, they're both ahead of Tutin in ADP, and I think there's good reason for that. ETN 2 years ago was a top 5 running back, maybe even top 3 if I remember correctly. But then when you look back at 2024, there's an argument to be made that Tank Bigsby was their best running back. So there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of murkiness, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see who ultimately wins out. And so all that to say, this is a backfield where I want to monitor what the reports are saying out of camp and marry that with how the ADP trends are emerging, and probably take some shots across different leagues at each one of these guys, knowing that it's going to be tough to predict right away. But once the data comes out in, weeks 1, 2, 3, early in the season, you can make an informed decision and figure out where to go from there. So I don't know how you're feeling, if you have any of those three you're leaning on, or leaning towards rather, but I think right now that's probably the most impactful backfield decision that I'm interested by.
Yeah, it's interesting because you read the camp reports and it's very clear, like a Tank Bigsby hype train like no other, right? He's playing with the ones. He's essentially a starter right now with the reports. But we both understand the receiving limitations, right? And that kind of running back, that archetype, only gets you so far. And then you have to imagine with Etienne going, what, first, not 92nd overall, you'd have to imagine he inherits the receiving work at least to start. And then like Tootin's the complete wild card, right? Who does he hurt more? What role does he take? Is this a wait and see with Tootin year two? Or is this somebody who basically tanks ETN's value? My question for you is the one that doesn't make sense to me right now is ETN. And so when you say you draft him, you take him in the ninth round as what? Like how do you see him this year? Because he's the one that's the most confusing.
Yeah, I think I can actually answer this question by kind of touching on all three at the same time. I think this is where your roster construction up to that point makes sense. If I'm in, round seven, eight, nine, whatever round it is, where you're in a position to start drafting ETN and the players that surround him, and let's say I'm in a situation where I went, hero RB or zero RB, and I'm kind of in need of a starter, at least to get me by for the initial portion of the season. That's where I think ETN becomes really appealing because even if you're a Tootin believer, I think it's reasonable to believe it's going to take until the later portion of the season for him as a rookie, and as is the case for a lot of rookies, to start to emerge and start to become a thing and actually be a player you can put in your starting lineups. Then
Mm-hmm.
the opposite side of that is, hey, maybe I went with this RB heavy build and I have some starters that I feel comfortable with to start the season. What I want now is to grab a stash who, come week 10, could be taking the league by storm. That's when I err on, okay, I probably don't need ETN on this build. Let me take the upside with a guy like Tootin. And then I think Bigsby is really just the kind of potential Goldilocks between them. I could see him going on either end of the spectrum there. His ADP reflects that. Agree, he won't be the guy who's catching a ton of passes and make a name for himself that way. But I think the ambiguity of this backfield in general just makes it so anybody can emerge. And so if I need some early
Yeah,
production, I'm leaning towards ETN. If I'm leaning towards, hey, I just want a dart throw that could explode later on down the line, that's when I think, okay, waiting for Tootin or to a lesser extent Bigsby strategically makes sense.
yeah. I'm with you. Think so. You don't think ETN's done? Because I know a lot of people think
No,
that.
no, no, not
You
by
think
not
there's
by any
something still left in
stretch.
the
I
tank?
mean, I
Okay.
think his days of getting the ridiculous volume he got 2 years ago are done. But I don't think he, as
Yeah.
a
Okay.
player, is just like all of a sudden washed and 70% of what he was a couple years ago when he was dominating.
Yep. Okay. Let's move on to the next backfield. And just for the record, I'm probably skipping ETN. I would take Bigsby for some running back depth, and then dart throw. That might be a waiver wire pickup. I like to. Um, but let's go to another backfield. Probably the second most unknown backfield. Right? Is this three-way? Probably a two-way split between Tyrone Tracy, Cam Scatterbo, and Devin Singletary. Um, and here, actually, let's get this out of the way. Singletary even worth being in this conversation?
Not to me.
Or are we
No,
going to have a
no, no,
two
no.
person?
I don't think
Okay.
so.
Okay. So right now, Tracy's going around RB 30s, ninth overall. Scatabo's going around 94th, RB 34 overall. So what the market's saying there is they don't know either. And so my initial thoughts when trying to handicap this, I was like, okay, Tracy's going to get the receiving work and Scottaboo's going to get the goal line. Felt like the easy way out. The more I kind of looked into it, Scottaboo's an awesome receiver, right? And it would be I don't know, a detriment to take him in the fourth round to not use him in some passing situation. So I think we all agree he's great at breaking tackles. He's great at yards after contact, but he's also a good receiver. And then when I was looking at Tracy, I was like, okay, last year he had a pretty good rookie year. After week 5, he averaged about 13 fantasy points per game. He was around 65% snap share in the total NFL for running backs in targets. With the one kind of blemish on his rookie season was the fumbling. So what I've come down to is I have no idea with this backfield. The only thing I feel confident in is I think if when healthy, Adebayo's going to get the goal line work. I think that Tracy's probably a good bet to have more value to start the year. What do you think?
Yeah,
Or
I
what don't you agree with in that work?
not necessarily in agree or disagree. I do think, the Giants are making it an open competition. I think one of the things worth calling out too is
Yeah.
Unlike some incumbents for ETN, for example, Tyron Tracy didn't have the draft capital. He also came out of nowhere last year, and we do see NFL teams cling on to guys because, hey, we spent a first round pick on this guy, we spent a second round pick on this guy. And so they stick around a little longer. So I don't think Tracy's going to have that luxury as much as some. But as far as what I actually think, I'm just not a Scatterbo person. I don't think he has the juice necessary to be a successful running back in the NFL. Yes, he might break a couple tackles, but I don't like guys that don't have that level of speed, and the fact that Tyron Tracy has done it at the NFL level, I'm leaning Tracy in that
Yeah.
side more often than not. But for the most part, this is really just a backfield I want to avoid because it is trending towards a split and it's going to be a bad offense. Whereas with the Jags, it's like, okay, it's probably trending towards a split in some way, shape, or form, but I at least have a little bit of confidence in
It's a
their
good
ability to
offense.
score points.
Yeah, and we should mention, right? The Giants have a putrid offensive line, right? Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. The prices are a little higher than you because there's this other backfield we're going to talk about in a second, and even the Jags, right? Like all these backfields are kind of in the same range in current redraft ADP, and I'm with you. This one feels a lot grosser than the Jags.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Cool. You want to move out of the running back position?
Yeah, yeah. I'll take my next one, and this is one that everybody's kind of been expecting to happen for a few years now, and it's going to be really interesting and fun uh, storyline to monitor is what's going to happen with the Ravens tight ends. For years and years and years, we've been looking at this and saying, okay, eventually Isaiah Likely is going to take over, but Mark Andrews has still stuck around. He's still been there. He was the highest scoring tight end last year, largely on the back of league leading. I think it was 11 touchdowns. Um, and so right now, Andrews is being drafted all the way as the tight end 6, which is about 80th overall, and Likely is the tight end 20, going all the way down to 169th overall. Me personally, I'm not touching Andrews at his cost this year, pretty much in any circumstance. But the reason I want to monitor this battle is because if Likely's cost stays, even if it creeps up to 15, he's a guy who, if I'm saying, hey, I'm going to punt on tight end this year, I don't get the Kittle, the McBride, the Bowers early. I'll just take Likely with my second to last pick and trust that he'll put up low end tight end one numbers. So that's what I really want to monitor is how often is Isaiah Likely going to get on the field? Not because it's going to influence what I'm going to do with Mark Andrews, but because it may make a pretty cheap, almost free, low end tight end one because we've seen the talent. We know the offense is going to be good. We know that he has that rapport with his quarterback already.
That's interesting. I thought you were going to go Andrews. Does the broken foot scare you at all? For
Yes, and that's, in terms of things that we need to monitor, something to keep an eye on for sure. If we find out, oh, Likely's actually going to miss the first 4 weeks of the season, this is kind of all moot. But if it's like, hey, maybe he's going to miss week 1 or no time at all, that's when you start to realize, okay, at this cost, this is a guy I want on my bench. And maybe he is just a backup tight end. Maybe you try and rotate, which you can absolutely do at cost. But I think he's a guy who has so much opportunity in front of him to exceed the tight end 20 current price.
and you believe that even with Andrews healthy, correct?
I do.
Just because
I
they'll
think
play two tight
one,
ends
he
enough.
could
Okay.
outright surpass him. I think even if Andrews is healthy, like it did look like he was declining last year, and it's possible that if Likely takes a step forward, Andrews takes a step back, all of a sudden you're looking at the guy who's just the tight end one in an awesome offense that likes to feature the tight end. But there's also a world where, again, they just become a heavy two tight end team. And even as a part time player, Likely returns more than enough value.
Let's play a little game. Late round tight end dart throw. Would you rather Isaiah Likely or Elijah Arroyo?
Likely.
Likely or Brenton Strange?
Strange. That's the line for me, I think. I think those two are pretty close to each other.
Gotcha. And then last one is Likely or Kyle.
Doesn't feel great, but at this point, I got to go Pitts, especially with Mooney being banged up. There's a chance he's the number
Yeah.
2 in the offense for a good portion of the season. Penix keeps raving about him. And
Yeah.
it doesn't feel great, but again, like he is going to be on the field in a more guaranteed role. I would take him over, either Strange or likely in this scenario, even though it doesn't feel good.
Got it. I think I'm avoiding both of them, right? Andrews and Likely. I don't, just like you, I don't trust the Andrews thing with the touchdowns and the massive drop in targets from last year. And Likely, I think there are other late round dart throws if Andrews healthy. If Andrews not healthy, I think it's a whole different conversation. But if Andrews
Hmm.
is there, I think it's going to be much of the same
Yeah.
as the last two
And
years.
that's exactly why I think it's important to monitor what's going on in camp, right? Because Andrews could be healthy and it could be Likely's job.
Yeah, that'd be. I mean, people have been calling it for a long time, right? As you know. All right, let's move on. All right, we're back. If you're wondering why I'm not wearing a hat and Dolan's hair looks a little bit worse, we had a couple of technical difficulties. We are back to continue our training camp battles for 2025. We're going to look at the Browns backfield. Just to get it out of the way at the start is kind of this Judkins question. Obviously, it's a terrible situation. But for fantasy football specifically, I'm operating as if he will not be a usable redraft asset, at least until late in the year. I doubt they're handing him 20 carries the second he gets back anyway. So this might be a great pickup for the playoff run or for week 12, but I don't think you can draft Judkins, especially not at an RB32 price. Do you have anything to add?
No, no, I think you summed it up well. I guess the only thing is just that RB2 or RB32, excuse me, price tag should continue to decline. But yeah, as far as the situation goes, I think you summed it up well.
Yeah. So let me get these ADPs out of the way. So right now, as I said, Judkins is going 87th overall RB32, which, as Dolan said, will be declining. Jerome Ford right now is RB48 at 145th. Dylan Sampson is RB56 at 162nd. So if we agree that we're not drafting Judkins, or if we're throwing a really, really late dart at him, what's interesting is looking at Ford's year last year and trying to decide was it good and is he a good player? So I think he essentially played 11 real games last year where he played a majority of the snaps. He averaged like 10 half point fantasy points per game and he scored 3 total touchdowns. I think it's safe to assume he will have the pass catching role coming out and he'll probably be the week 1 starter. It kind of ends there with what's intriguing about Ford. So Ford is one of those guys, I think, where if you go zero RB or if you just need somebody to kind of maybe you have a week 4, week 5 by week filler, somebody you think will get 60% of the snaps to start the season, they'll be behind a bunch. So there might be some kind of fill-in upside right there. I don't think he's going to be a league winner or anything. And then you get to Samson. So Samson's didn't have the pass catching profile coming out, which is why it's really interesting that they drafted him and Judkins back to back. But if you're going to go with either of these two guys, I think the play is Samson later in the year. He's a big play guy, can hit the holes, make something out of nothing. A sick athlete, and if you get him later, maybe later in the year, is kind of what you'd look at. What do you think, Dolan? Brown's backfield.
Yeah, I think I am generally staying away from it. I do agree with the sentiment of like, hey, if you find yourself in a zero RB build or some situation where you just are going to need something you can slot into your lineup to start the season, I think Ford is passable at a very affordable price. And, you hope that you do that obviously with a stacked receiver room and hopefully a strong tight end and quarterback as well. So I don't want to find myself in that situation terribly often, but if that is your strategy, I think Ford is a good pivot. I do find myself leaning in mock drafts and such more towards Samson for the exact reasons that you highlight. I do think there is some upside with him as the season progresses. Cleveland and Kevin Stefanski have always, even at Nick Chubb's peak, tried to get a multi-back system going. And I think if there is a world where whether Judkins comes back or it's still Ford as the primary starter all year long, I think Samson's more likely to have some level of value between weeks like 4. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think he'll necessarily be valuable right away through the end of the season. It's possible he overtakes Ford, and it's possible he's a valuable number 2 alongside Judkins if he's to play. So that's why I lean towards Samson there. But if you are truly just in a situation where you're like, I just want to not be able to have like a complete and glaring hole in one of my RB spots. I would feel a little more confident starting the season with Ford.
Yeah, Samson's a dart throw. The good thing is without Judkins, right? He'll because we don't. I don't think either of us think Ford's a like he's a workhorse. He's going to get 100%, like 80% of the snaps guy, right? So Samson will get touches early on. I think that's pretty certain, which probably wouldn't have happened without Judkins. So who knows, right? Maybe he'll progress as a player. Maybe he's really good, right? And he wouldn't have had the opportunity this early. And just to bring it back to our previous conversation with the Tracy Scattaboo discussion, Samson's a much cheaper option if we're going full dart throws.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, like the Giants, though, bad offensive line. Will be playing from behind a lot, and so I'm not sure Samson's skill set fits exactly what that offense is going to look like, at least in year one.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
All right. I don't think I have nothing else on the Browns. If you want to.
No, I don't think so. I think just only call out, we didn't touch on this a ton. For those who don't know, Dylan Sampson and Quinshon Judkins are both rookies. Sampson being their fourth round pick this year, Judkins being their second. So, the hit rates for fourth round running backs are certainly not great. So neither are by any stretch of the imagination a sure thing. And so I do think that also tips the scales a little bit in Ford's favor. If you're like, look, I want someone who has shown it on an NFL field. But I did really like Sampson coming out. I just, hated where he got drafted behind another running back and in a bad offense.
Yeah, I mean, if Dylan Sampson was drafted to the Chiefs, man, what this it
Totally
would
different
be. Oh,
scenario.
I know it would be wheels up. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
All right, I got one more if we're ready to keep it moving here. So my last one, I'll touch on a position we haven't touched on yet is quarterbacks, and I'm actually really interested for a very specific reason in monitoring the Colts quarterback situation. It may feel crazy, but when you think back, well, I guess it was just last year, right? Thinking about how high Anthony Richardson was getting drafted, he was going as like a top 5 quarterback last year. And that wasn't because of how good he is at throwing the ball or frankly, how good he is at football in general. Um, and everything that made him such an appealing fantasy asset last year still 100% holds true today, with the exception being he doesn't have the starting job lockdown. But that's exactly why I want to monitor this, because if he does win the starting job, he's currently the QB 29. And granted, that'll go up a good amount, but I'd be a little surprised if he cracks the top 20 or so, just because he did burn so many people last year. I think people are worried that even if he starts, he won't play a full season. But if I'm getting Anthony Richardson at QB 20 or later prices as a starter, I'm all over that, because the upside with your probably last pick in the draft is absolutely astronomical. And even though he is the, tentative backup right now, he's actually still 2 quarterback ranks ahead of Daniel Jones, who's currently the QB 31. I'm not touching Daniel Jones whatsoever in your standard redraft single quarterback league. Like he's a fine backup or depth piece in a dynasty league if you need a QB 3 or 4, and you're playing a format that requires 2 quarterbacks to start. But as far as just typical redraft goes, if I'm trying to play a late round QB strategy, or maybe I draft a QB earlier who's like safe but doesn't possess a ton of upside, if Anthony Richardson wins that battle, I'm going to be drafting him everywhere. I don't know. What do you think? Am I crazy? Is the logic flawed? To me, it's just the best cheap possible dart throw you can get at the end of the round.
The logic's not bad. Do you do this move if you know for sure he's not starting week one? So Daniel Jones has been coming out of camp. Daniel Jones is named the starter. Do you still draft him late?
No, no. And that's exactly why this belongs in this segment to me. It's like I do want to watch that. And as soon as that
Yeah.
news comes out, I'm making moves. And if Jones does come out as the starter, like I'm still
Yeah.
going to keep my eye on Richardson, because as much as Jones may not hold the job all year, if they announce a quarterback switch is coming, I'm prepared to drop a ton of fab on Richardson if I need a quarterback.
Did you see the report today? It's on
Their
their
depth
like
chart.
week one. They just as their quarterback, they listed like Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, that was a first. I found that one funny.
I'm with you. I mean, there's no better upside. It's just that there's other things there that it's not just like it's the combination of like he's a bad passer. Clearly, he's worn out his welcome a little bit in Indy.
Hmm.
right? That whole off the sideline thing. I don't know. It's not just your normal like, oh, he didn't have a good couple games. We don't know if he's a good NFL. There's a lot there, but for fantasy, we don't care about any of that, right? We saw those 3 games when he was a rookie. We saw the first game last year where he put up 25 points. Yeah, I mean, if he's a starter week 1, I think his ADPs are going to fly up the board. All right.
Sure.
All right, cool. Let's move on to our last training camp battle. And this one's a little, let's call it not mainstream, but something that kind of interests me, Dolan, I'm not sure if it interests you, is Mike Clay has Josh Allen to throw like 525 times this year. If you kind of break this down, there's probably 100 or so targets that are going to go to Khalil Shakir, depending on how bad this injury is. Dalton Kincaid and the tight ends will probably be somewhere between 70 to 100. And then James Cook will probably be kind of at 40. That still leaves 200, 250 targets from one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL that I have no idea where they're going to go. And so we're looking at Keon Coleman, let's call it a disappointing first year with a semi good kind of college production, high draft pick, early second rounder coming in, and 2 excuse my language, retread guys in Elijah Moore, who showed a little bit of promise as a rookie, has never put it together, and Josh Palmer, who's probably just a journeyman. And so there's one argument to this with where, oh, they all get 40 targets and none of them are valuable, but I'm not so sure. I think there's a scenario where one of these guys emerges, and I'm hoping you're going to tell me who it's going to be. So when I look at Keon Coleman, he was like the guy for good targets, bad execution, right? He had those high ADOT 15-yard targets, but he only caught 50% of the passes Josh Allen threw his way. He honestly led the league in that target quality rating, which like combines catchable and average ADOT. And he's number 1 in the entire NFL. But then you have Elijah Moore, who operates better on the outside than you think, with Khalil Shakir in the slot. And then Josh Palmer had kind of high expectations last year, but didn't put together with Justin Herbert. So I don't really have a lean. It's more of a, I'm going to bring it up and say, is there something here, or am I totally trying to make something?
No, I actually do have a fairly strong opinion on this one. I'm not super interested in hoping Elijah Moore becomes a thing.
Yeah.
I think we've seen Josh Palmer. It's like he's going to be good for the Bills offense. He'll be good for Josh Allen, but he's
Yes.
pretty clearly not a guy who's going to put up fantasy relevant numbers himself. So I actually do find myself
Keon
pretty
Coleman.
high on Keon Coleman
Yeah.
because of the situation that you did a good job outlining, but also because coming out, like he was typically regarded as a toolsy guy, as a bit of a
Yeah.
project and things of that nature. This is a guy who came in with a basketball background, was a little late to football, and so it's like, okay, if this type of profile doesn't break out year one, I'm not going to sweat over it. I'm not going to overreact to him not taking
Yeah.
the league by storm with his rookie numbers, and I think he's much more of a complementary player to what they
Hmm.
already have too. Like I think when you look at Elijah Moore, obviously Josh Palmer's a little bigger, but like role wise, he'll play a similar. Like they all kind
Yeah.
of operate in similar areas of the field. Whereas Keon Coleman's the only one who I can see like, hey, this guy's going to play our X. He's going to win on the outside. He's going to be a
Hmm.
threat in the red zone.
Yeah.
And with that, I think he has the best shot of any of the receivers, Shakir included, even at just double digit touchdowns.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point with Shakir, where I'm chalking Shakir up as like, oh, that's your number 1. Khalil
Mm-hmm.
Shakir's a really good NFL receiver. He's not one of the guys who just demands target.
Yeah,
Like
he's
he's not going
he's
to be a
he's one of the
150
like
target guy.
he's one of the guys you like to have on your team in a full PPR when he's not like your heavy hitter.
Yeah, exactly. And Dalton Kincaid kind of hasn't put it together yet either. I think that's probably a lot of people's one of their favorite tight end sleepers.
Hmm.
Okay, so you're a Keon Coleman guy. I just said it,
Yeah,
like the profile, but yeah, okay. I
yeah.
can see
I,
it.
I
Like
I
on
think the
paper, it makes
talent's there.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's very well. Like Keon Coleman, honestly, is one of those guys who it even feels like if it doesn't happen this year, I'll still talk myself into him next year because I
Next
do
year.
think he's a
Yeah.
slow progression type of guy. But I see the path
Hmm.
this year. All that said, I still think the most likely scenario is Josh Allen just spreads the ball around a ton, and you don't love starting any of these guys, but there will be some good spike weeks in there.
Yeah, with Khalil Shakir specifically in PPR, he's like a nice. I need a flex spot for a bye week, and like he
Hmm.
gets you 15 points a game, and it's great. Keelan Coleman's probably a little more. The highs could be higher. The valleys will most certainly be lower. Exactly. Yeah, and two things. I don't know if I mentioned it. The Palmer is the groin injury, and then Shakir has a pretty bad high ankle sprain, I think. So he's going to miss the entire preseason, potentially into the first couple weeks, which might give your guys some more target chances there. All right, cool. That was our training camp battles that entice us. I know there's probably a bunch that we miss and we're also into, but episode.
Yeah,
Let's call it
if anybody wants to know about other battles, leave a comment. We'll get back to you and
comment.
share
You
our
could,
thoughts.
yeah, we could. Any comment, we'll do a video right there. That's
I'm not making that promise, but we'll at least answer to you and share our 2 cents, and we'll try and sneak it into episode 9 or 10 or something coming up before the season starts.